Blue. And you're live.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are live here with the AIB Pillar 4 Advisory Board. I'm going to have our board members and guests introduce themselves in a minute. I'm Ellie Mitchell. I am the co-chair. My fellow co-chair will be joining us shortly. Today we are excited to get an update from the Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports. We are also I'm going to pass the mic back over to Rachel in a second to get some AIB updates, and then we'll go to our guests. And then after our guests, we'll be having a just brief discussion with members of the advisory board on kind of what they're seeing on the ground and any updates that folks want to share. So we will be starting with the updates, right, Rachel? And then we will switch over to our consortium guests.
Ellie, can we make one?
But first
can we flip it?
Do you want
and let the consortium go first? Yeah, we talked about that, and I didn't get to tell you.
Can we do just a quick round of introductions for those who are on the call before we do that? Yeah. So Joe, I'll start with you and then let everybody else go around.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Manko. I work as the Education Program Officer at the ABLE Foundation, and I'm also a board member on the Accountability and Implementation Board.
Hope, you want to go next, and then we'll go to our...
My name is Hope McGuire. I'm an interim community school coordinator right now in MCPS, along with still doing program management. And so it's nice to be here with you today.
Awesome. We should touch base to hear how that's going for you. Rachel?
Sure. I am Rachel Amseth, the policy director here at the AIB.
Lisa?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Armstrong, the policy analyst for Pillar 4 at the AIB.
Great. And that gives us a good transition to move. Sorry, I'm about to be invaded by teenagers. To move to our guests and have each of them introduce themselves, and you can launch into your update since we are flip-flopping that on the agenda.
Mark?
Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. Yeah, we haven't seen you since, so Happy New Year to 2024. See a lot of new faces and some places we've seen before. So very nice to see you again, Ellie and Rachel, as always. Mark Luckner, Community Resource Commission. Lorianne?
Hi, Ellie. It's good to see that you're in the carpool, because that's about where I'm headed in a minute or two. So I will be off camera most of the time. But Lorianne Moss, policy analyst with the consortium and the CHRC.
Jen?
Jen Clatterbuck, Commission Administrator, CHRC Administrator.
Great. Well, Rachel and Ellie, thanks again for the opportunity to come and brief the group on the progress that we're making in implementing the main provisions that we were asked to in Pillar 4, the Consortium on Coordinated Community Sports. I believe everyone remembers about the consortium because we've been before you in the past, but so shall we kind of dive right in, give you a quick update, and we're happy to answer questions, and we prepared a PowerPoint that we're happy to provide to you so you can have access to information. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Okay, cool. And I'm happy to have it be dynamic. So if folks want to ask us questions as we go, happy to do that too. Does that sound good? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is our title page. Great to be part of Pillar 4. The best pillar of all 5, right? Pillar 4. Yep. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a rather elaborate slide. It just gives you a sense of some of the key steps along the way since we got together. I still remember when our chair, who was appointed by the presiding officers, Dave Rudolph. Does everybody remember Dave Rudolph from the legislature? Yeah, big hulking 6'7" former principal, from Cecil County legislator, right? He came up to our office in Annapolis. What's our square feet, Jen? It's real small, real small square feet. Yep.
Probably 300, maybe.
Yeah, we got together and we mapped out our responsibilities on a whiteboard that Jen was had the foresight to have repainted when we were all kicked out from COVID. The DBM gave us the opportunity to repaint the wall, and we mapped out this elaborate strategy to implement what we were asked to do in the consortium pages for those of us that remember 170 through 179. Rachel, you got to tell Rachel I remember the page numbers, 170 through 179. Right. We kicked that off in the summer of 2022, last summer, and pretty soon we had a meeting. In fact, I think Rachel Heiss presented at our first meeting in August. And then we very quickly, folks, you know me, I used to work in the legislature, so we formed 4 subcommittees, framework and RFP design, data and program evaluation, outreach, and then best practices. Those 4 subcommittees met, gosh, Lorianne, almost several times throughout each month. We began by soliciting public comment on a set of key questions. We used that public comment to guide our first call for proposals that was issued. That call for proposals was for services, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then we had another call for proposals that helped solicit applications to begin to build the administrative apparatus of the community support partnership framework across the state, which we'll talk about in a moment. And so we now find ourselves nearing the end of that first RFP grant review process. February 8th, the Community Health Resource Commissioners, who are asked by the legislature to serve as the fiscal agent for these funds, will make awards February 8th. Folks are welcome to come to that meeting. And then the awards for the hubs, which will be the administrative entities in the community support partnership collective impact model, they'll be made, I don't know, let's call it March Madness for basketball fans, right? March Madness. Yep. Okay. So this is just a visual timeline to show you what we've been accomplishing over the last 18 months. And thanks again to our good friends at AIB for giving us constructive feedback along the way and being so available to have us bounce ideas off you. So we really appreciate the partnership. Let's go to the next slide. So this just shows you the 2 RFPs that we have on our plates right now. The first RFP provided a menu of 15 evidence-based practices, right, Lorianne? 15 evidence-based practices that folks could draw from. And then there was a whole nother menu of another 30 that folks could draw on. And we really went around the state. We thought it was our responsibility, dating all the way back to the spring, right, Jen? Through the summer and then through the fall. Jen has the expense reports to prove it. For me, we of the 24 jurisdictions, we went to 21 of them in person. We thought it was our responsibility to make sure that every single community, political jurisdiction, school districts, they knew about this important funding opportunity made available by the Maryland General Assembly. And so we were overwhelmed by the response. 258 proposals requesting $380 million. Proposals from every area of the state. The proposals range from requests as high as 17 million for one request, all the way down to, what was it, Lorianne? I think almost 30,000 for another request. So, so we chewed through very carefully those 258 proposals and following a very competitive and rigorous review process. We convened a review committee, the consortium looked at the proposals, and then now 129 proposals with revised requests of just under 113 million are moving forward to my commission on February 8th, and then awards will be made later that month. I'll keep going, and then I'm happy to answer questions as we go, or it's hard for me to talk and read at the same time because I'm male, so I can only do one thing at once, right? Okay, is that okay? And then we'll get to the, okay, good, look at that smile. Okay, so those are the service awards, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. At the same time, we also issued a hub RFP, which was issued a little bit before Halloween, and that's open to local management boards and local behavioral health authorities. And we're looking toward up to 10 pilots across the state to try to test and develop and operationalize the community support partnership model. We got 17 proposals, all areas of the state. Of the 17, I think 13 or 14 are from local behavioral health authorities. Another 4 or 5 or so are from local management boards. Of the 17, 3 look to serve more than one jurisdiction. Most are from one jurisdiction, but there are a couple that want to serve multiple, like from the shore or I think from another area of the state. Let's go to the next slide. This gives you the geographic distribution where the proposals for the services came from. It all adds up to 258. Let's go to the next slide. This gives you the amount requested by jurisdiction, 380 million. Let's go to the next slide. And then this gives you a sense of the group of proposals moving forward, and then I'll answer some questions. We were really thrilled, and it was something that we wanted to set as a goal, that we got at least one proposal from every jurisdiction. This is a statewide program, to point out the obvious, right? So we thought it was important to make sure that every community had the opportunity to apply for the funding. In addition to the review criteria that we put in the RFP, which all added up to a 100-point scale, we thought that geographic balance and equity should be really key factors that we consider when making these awards. We were happy and encouraged applicants to draw on all 3 tiers of services, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And we also encouraged local education agencies who had to provide a letter of support, which was mandatory, to really have, if they got in their mind's eye, their jurisdiction, the full array of children served by the blueprint is addressed. You know, earliest kids all the way up to, you know, those in high school. Many of the 120 applicants already had a relationship with their school system, and many of them drew on an array of the different evidence-based practices listed in the RFP. Finally, there are some applicants that serve more than one jurisdiction. I think that gets us close to the end of the slide deck, and I'm looking forward to the interactive part. Is it 2 more? Okay, all right, so we'll get to the next 2 slides. Okay, so this gives you a flavor. I'm not going to read each of them, but this gives you a flavor of some of the types of programming that these awards to be made on February 8th look to promote. And I would just pause here. Lorian, if you want to jump in, I know that you're in transit, and expand here. We relied on significant technical assistance and expertise from our best practices subcommittee, which is chaired by Derek Simmons, who some of you may know as a superintendent in Caroline County, and then Dr. Campo, psychiatrist from Kenny Krieger. And then also we got great assistance from the National Center on School Mental Health, who the legislature wrote into the bill, helping us in these efforts. Let's go to the next slide. So these are this is an overview of the hub. I sort of said that earlier, and it gives you a sense of the hub awards. I see that there's a couple of questions in the chat function, and like I said, I'd like to have it be an interactive discussion here. So we're happy to go back to whichever slide you like, and I'm happy to take questions as they come. Does that sound good, Rachel?
Yep.
Yeah, I think why don't you take the chat questions first? And I have a question, but I'll wait for the ones that have already been submitted.
Okay. So I guess I'll go into the chat function, and I'll just say them for folks that might not be able to read them. So the first question.
That's correct.
Okay. First question, Joe, you asked, what's the average amount that was awarded? You know, that's a really good question. I don't have that committed to memory. Happy to do the calculation for you. I would say, you know, we could kind of figure out how to do that calculus, you know, but at the 10,000 foot perspective, it's 129 grants for just about 112 million. And there was wide variance. The budget awards that we were asked. Like I said, there was one as small as 30,000 and one that was as high as 17 million. And we scrutinized those budget requests. Lorian really did some fabulous work with our fiscal team. We scrutinized these requests and really, I don't know if you guys like this metaphor, I'll use it. You know when you get out of the shower, right, and you have one towel that's like really wet and the other one's like not so wet, and you got to take a towel and you like rinse it out, and I got to get all this excess water out, and then I'm going to put it up to dry. Well, we did that with these budgets because we thought it was our responsibility as a fiscal agent for these funds that they're public resources. So if someone said, look, I'm going to hire 10 psychiatrists in 6 months, we're like, no, you're not. So we looked at these, what they asked to do to make sure that what we were funding is practicable and achievable. So that's how I'd answer the average size question. Second chat question from Hope. Can you go back to the amounts by LEA again, or drop a presentation in the chat? You guys are welcome to this presentation after the meeting. And just, I lost track of the question. Was the question about the amount requested for hubs? Because we haven't made the awards yet.
Yes, it's actually what she has posted, just like proposals received and what they were asking for.
Yeah, so this here, Hope, is the for services. the hubs are 17 awards requesting, I think, like 9 million and change. Okay. Any more questions in the chat, or shall we take questions as they come?
I know that one of the hopes that you had for, I mean, maybe both the service providers and the hub providers was that they would be able to already or be willing to figure out how to do some billing, reimbursable billing for services from, from the federal health programs or otherwise. Did you see that appear in the applications, or does that seem like something that's going to require a lot more technical assistance for grantees?
Can I answer this way, El? Yes and yes. and I'll put a finer point on it. So folks will remember of the 12 statutory responsibilities that the legislature gave us, pages 170 through 179. One of them is to maximize Medicaid reimbursement. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Actually, it's Medicaid reimbursement, commercial, and hospital community benefit. So some of the applicants are very skilled and knowledgeable and already very comfortable billing Medicaid, and they sort of got that down, right? And there are others that are going to require some technical assistance. And so we asked, Lorianne can help me here, but we asked applicants to comment on their capacity to bill Medicaid, and we plan on assisting those who need assistance to do so. Does that give your point, Ellen?
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I can jump in, and we haven't done the analysis yet for the 129 applicants that are moving forward because there's some fluidity to that list, but you remind me that we do need to do that ultimately. In terms of the proposals we received, about 40% of them were billing Medicaid. So it'll be something in that range in terms of the ones that are moving forward. And then applicants also had the opportunity to let us know that they would be interested in billing Medicaid if we provided that support. So we're moving ahead with that, TA.
I asked that because that seems like a significant way to leverage more resources into this very important area, and build capacity of the providers to do that. So it's one of the things that I think is exciting about this opportunity. And so it's good to hear that so many of them already had that capacity, but also that many more may be able to come along with that service.
Absolutely. And when we look at the membership that the legislature gave us, our 25, I think it is, members, we have 2 from the Department of Health, and the legislature approved legislation, adding another one from the Department of Health from the Medicaid office. So we actually have the Deputy Secretary himself, Ryan Moran, serving on the consortium, and the Department of Health is really, I don't want to put this, leaning in. Is that a good, they're leaning in to kind of making sure we can do everything we can to maximize the opportunities that the federal government is making available. In fact, he just presented to Ryan just presented to one of our subcommittees, the Best Practices Subcommittee, earlier this afternoon.
Are there other questions for our team here?
Yeah, I had one question. Just kind of curious about moving forward. I mean, it seems like there's I know a lot of these awards were just granted, but this seems like a tremendous opportunity to just throughout the course of the year and subsequent years learn about what is working and figure out ways that we can continue to share that information, optimize things. So wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of learning process of this and how you'll be able to elevate, what the plan is for elevating best practices, for sharing things that you're seeing that are really, really successful with particular awardees that can be integrated into the programs of other awardees, just innovations that can be replicated that are, we're seeing great success from certain areas that we can expand to other areas. So if you could talk a little bit around the strategy of like learning, like I guess evaluating the progress and then learning from this and then sharing those best practices so that they can expand to other areas.
Thank you for that, Joe. Yeah, there's a lot of ways I can take the answer. So okay. So let me answer your comment, or maybe a little more of a suggestion. Then could I do that? I'm going to do it in a couple of ways. Okay. And feel free to get back on and say, no, that's not really what I really want you to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of things. I'm going to unpack what you said, and I agree with where you're going with this. So number one, the 12 aforementioned statutory responsibilities, requires the consortium to collect and disseminate best practices and put them out through the field. So we're starting to think about that. We plan to do that in a couple ways. Okay, and we're open to the feedback.
Yeah.
First, I think one of the reasons why the legislature asked the commission to serve as the fiscal agent for these funds is we really, we've been around since 2005. I've been here since 2009. We really, I think, excel, if you don't mind my saying that. We excel in distributing precious public resources and making sure that these public resources are used in accordance with the purpose of the RFP or the law, or in this case now, the consortium blueprint funding. And so, the awards will be made, and we will hold grantees accountable for performance, number one. Number two, as the awards are made, we will collect and report process and outcome measures that will come to the commission. Ultimately, it'll go through the hubs, but for the first year and a half or so, process measures will come back to us. We will have the grantees submit narrative reports to the consortium and commission, and we'll call through those with the assistance of the National Center and others, and really try to pull out kernels of learning, nuggets of wisdom and best practices, and then communicate the lessons learned back out to the grantees. And then I've lost track of how many numbers I'm on to. Maybe it's number 3. We're having the National Center on School Mental Health, Sharon Hoover and Nancy Lever and those guys, help us staff this measurement-based care learning collaborative. And so we plan to be able to pull together our grantees and really push out best practices in the field. Some of the trade associations that have membership on our consortium, I think, will be big players. I think the pediatricians have a lot to do. I think CBH, as an example, has a lot to do. Of course, our colleagues that I'm getting to know in secondary and education. Lorianne and I just presented to the directors of student services this afternoon, and they gave us a lot to think about in terms of getting these grants up. So I guess my way of saying that, Joe, is I think we want to really manage these grants, make sure that they achieve their objectives, provide the requisite technical assistance, and then collect and disseminate the best practices that we learn. That's our responsibility. It's right there in the language of the act. Is that kind of what you were looking for?
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, since the longer I've been here at the commission, the more I want to try to forge vibrant relationships with colleagues with private philanthropy. So if there's a role for my colleagues, I know it's not called ABAG anymore. I think it's called the Maryland Philanthropy Network. If there's a role for them to play, here.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much for that response.
I think you just lost Gail.
Maybe she's in transit.
Were there any more parts of the presentation?
I think we got through the slide deck. Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Any other questions? I am now out of the car and home safely. Well, I want to thank you for bringing this update to us. I think it's really helpful. This is one of the pieces of the pillar that a lot of people don't know. I mean, I know you guys have done your due diligence and making sure that people know as much about it as possible, but I mean, overall, people are still like vague about what's in the blueprint, right? Like, what are the concrete things that the blueprint does for people? And so I think that's one of our tasks as advisory board members, and that we're going to have going forward, is to make sure that people are really educated about what the blueprint, how the blueprint is changing dynamics for young people in our state, and the ability to access the supports that are going to come through these service providers and these hubs, and to have, I just think it's going to increase the volume, it's going to increase the availability, it's going to be really helpful. And I keep trying to tell everybody, you know, this is coming, it's coming. And so you have to watch out for it and pay attention. And so it's really helpful to be able to see things from the theoretical, what's in the pages 170 to 179 through to the application of that. And so I you know, kudos to your team, and excited to see the final list of grantees and all the things that they'll be doing, and to share that information with all our community school coordinators and, you know, people who are thinking about implementing the blueprint around the state. So good job.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the partnership with AIB. Really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you, Mark, Lorianne, and Jen, for being here. We really appreciate it. We'll share the slide deck with the committee members and also post it with the meeting materials on our website so that it's available for anybody that's able to catch this a little bit later.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Have a
being here.
nice night, everybody.
Have a good meeting.
Thanks.
Well, I think it's now sort of down to Hope and I and Joe, but I had hoped that we might spend a few minutes. Oh, we need our AIB updates for sure, which will come next. And then I was hoping we would spend a few minutes just, and Hope, you're in the middle of this, like you are doing the thing. So you may have some great things to share. But I wanted to do a little bit of like what's happening on the ground collection from advisory board members. But I will pass it over to Rachel first to give us the scoop on the things that we should be watching AIB wise. I have some questions for you too, so
Perfect.
let's go.
Perfect. I'm finding that that's probably the best way to handle the updates at each of our meetings, is a couple of high level things happening at the AIB, and then really the questions from the team of what you're curious to know about. On the high level side of things, we're in session. So obviously we're paying attention to what's happening in session and tracking any proposed bills. The next big focus for us this time of year is the submission of the LEA plans that are due March 15th. And so this year we're doing this in a bifurcated process. And so on March 15th, each of the 24 LEAs will submit their response to question number 1. Which is allowed to be like 10% of their submission. It's up to 10 pages. And then they have until May 1st. Did I say March 1st before? Because it was March 15th. March 15th and May 1st are the submission deadlines, and the May will be the full response. We just recognize that the questions required a bit more time to be able to allow the LEAs to provide the thoughtful responses about blueprint implementation. So we will have a piece of the submissions in March, and then the complete full response in May. The state agency plans this year have been shifted to June. So last year they were all turned in together. But we have made that change in the blueprint comprehensive plan to shift the 5 state agencies to June so that there's a more timely review process for each of the plans that come in. The next piece that is kind of the heart of our work as we're getting deeper and deeper into blueprint implementation is technical assistance. And so there's a lot of technical assistance sessions that are occurring around the 2024 plan, but we're also starting to provide more technical assistance sessions as topics are becoming more timely or more urgent in Blueprint implementation. So Pillar 1, we've launched a early childhood committee to support the work around public-private partnerships for increasing the number of students receiving pre-K services. But in Pillar 4, we're definitely working around community schools, and I'm actually going to introduce again my colleague Lisa Armstrong. This is the final quick update I want to give. We have added 2 additional policy analysts. So Ellie, you'll remember Lisa from earlier this year. She started with the AIB as a contractual employee back in session last year, and she joined our team in October. Lisa will really be focusing on Pillar 4 and will become a really great liaison to both this advisory committee and then also our partners who are supporting the work of Pillar 4. So as the AIB staff is expanding, we're able to allow people to specialize a little bit more on deeper content. So Lisa's really taking a lead with the community schools and is going to be collaborating with MSDE and their team there who supports community schools. And then we're starting to review some of the recent community school needs assessment submissions and all of that. So we're digging in over here at the AIB as we're increasing our staff and our ability to really help support implementation. So those are kind of the biggest high level things that are happening right now, but I'm eager for your questions.
My question is about outcomes and measurements work group and the
Ooh.
framework.
That
is
it's
what-
a
where
good
are
thing
we on
have
that?
Joe here.
What?
It's a good thing we have Joe here. And your question is just broadly kind of an update.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the things I thought our advisory board group members could dig into is to look very specifically at the Pillar 4 outcomes and understand them, chew on them. I don't know if there's any opportunity still for revision. If not, then at least we would be wrestling with what's in there and how that might be actualized for the districts that are implementing. So I was hoping at some point we would have like a feedback opportunity on the outcomes and measures themselves. But if that process is more complete and we're already moving forward implementing, then talking about what that looks like might be also helpful for the advisory board.
Well, I would love to turn this to Joe, who is taking a lead with this outcome measures work group with Dr. Stapleton.
Sure. So yeah, the work is continuing. The group met for, gosh, it was probably a span of about 8 months to go through and identify what the outcome and output measures are that they were interested in tracking. And I need to go back, but I think we ended up with there's 42 measures, so in the low 40s measures across each of the all of the pillars, and we're in the process now of the target setting. So I think this is actually and it's great that you bring this up, Ellie, because I think it is a good opportunity for each of the advisory groups to chime in. I think for the most part, the measures are set, but I think we're having where some additional input is definitely needed is around really like defining who is included in, like how you would go through and actualize it and include the measure. So like something that is seemingly simple, like the number of teachers, right? Like there's actually a lot of nuance, right? Because does this include conditionally certified teachers, alternatively certified teachers? Does it include part-time teachers? Like, does it, like who actually is included within the universe of this measure that you would seemingly have a everybody would have a universal understanding of, but
Like partners too.
absolutely, right? So, for any number of these measures, like trying to go through and provide some parameters around more or less like who is in the denominator for each of these measures. And then also providing some, I think one of the things we're struggling with right now is, of these, 40-ish measures, like, how many of them do we have data for? How many of them do we have to go through and collect there needs to be new sets of data that are generated. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think it would be very, very helpful for the measures that correspond to each of the pillars to farm those out to some of the different to each of the advisory groups to go through and just get some like feedback and commentary on what they think of the measure, if there's things that they would modify and change about it. And then I think more importantly for like what's going on specifically at this moment, like how would you go through and define the group that's being the denominator for each of these groups that we're trying to track.
That would be great. Is there a document we can share now in advance of our next meeting that would allow us to kind of give people a pre-read and some homework so that when we come together, we're not looking at it and trying to respond to it in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rachel, we probably just got to reach out to Emma and see if we get, it'd be great to have a full list of the measures and then, have them broken down by pillar so that each of the pillar groups can look specifically at the measures that they have deep expertise in. And then, also like we have a document that has like kind of notes on the side because there's been a lot of back and forth between MLDS and MSDE on like, we have data for this, but like, this data set is not totally complete, or, we started collecting data on this in, 2021, but we don't have historical data for it, but we have recent data for it. So, we're in the process of like really kind of collecting notes on each of these measures to figure out like what we have and what we still need to get.
I would definitely like to see that, partly because of working in a LEA. One of the things I think we just need to unify also is how do you measure the measures in the sense of what tools are we going to use? Because if you just say surveys, one person survey can look this way, one can look this way. So being very intentional about supporting the lift of this work for the LEA, so we're not putting a lot of administrative burden. They are supposed to still be focused on children, but making sure that we can ensure that it's apples to apples and not apples to oranges and grapefruits and lemons. Sure. About how the data is submitted back to us. Even because what one person might classify, like Ellie said, for partners and the engagement of the partners and what they're doing, along with, I think one time it said volunteer hours. So what are we looking for, like volunteer hours compared to your population size, volunteer hours around a particular topic, really ensuring that it's aligned in that sense.
And it's probably also not, it's probably important to note and not, it was probably predictable that like, of all the pillars, pillar 4 is the one where I think the measures are the most challenging to track. Like we have less access to some of the kind of hard metrics that are more apparent in some of the other pillars. So, all this to say, in particular, important to get some more, get some input and feedback from especially ground level practitioners that can speak to this more robustly.
That would be great. Yeah, looking forward to seeing that. And Rachel, if we could do it for next time, that would be great. If not, then maybe we can have it for the March meeting. But if we could do it for February, and I know that's that's just weeks away.
It is. These months are flying by, but I'll send out a request today and see what we can do, and we'll keep you in the loop and see if February is possible.
Great. So that was my only question. Hope, do you have any other AIB update questions for Rachel?
No.
All right. So I think we wanted to do a little sharing. It's just us, but we'll do that anyway. I think the one thing I wanted to share, which was Rachel brought up at the beginning, is that I was in Annapolis testifying for one of the bills that is a blueprint related bill, which is Senate Bill 161, House Bill 200. And for those who are interested in the bill, there's also another hearing coming up next week in the House. And we are also probably going to be working on some amendment language. We've had some suggested amendments from the LEAs and MSCA, all of which we're amenable to, and I think we can work on good language that will work for everybody. The basic idea behind this bill was just to strengthen the provisions, the community school provisions within the blueprint. We had a previous definitions bill that some of the language got moved over into the blueprint, but not all of it. And so a couple of areas we were shoring up were just like who should be on school leadership teams, the notion of having some common elements of a needs assessment so we can do apples to apples at the state level in terms of rolling up data. Just the kind of focus on making sure we were being as inclusive and aligned to national best practices on the definition of what a community school does and how it operates. And then the biggest change that has some fiscal impact to the LEAs is the blueprint gave the districts that have 40 or more community schools up to 50% flexibility with their concentration of poverty grant dollars. And the school districts that have fewer have 0% flexibility with their concentration of poverty grant dollars. So this bill gives those schools with fewer than 40 schools the flexibility of 10%, which personally I think is a good number. 50% always felt a little too high to me, to be honest. But to have no ability to have some of that control over how those dollars are being spent, I'm sure Hope you from an LEA perspective, and to have no infrastructure to provide training at the local level and support at the local level vis-a-vis these dollars, particularly now as Maryland LEAD ends and the federal recovery dollars are leaving, which is how some districts have funded some of those coordinator positions at the district level. This seems like the right time and the right thing to do. So I'm opinionizing a little bit. All opinions are my own. Ellie Mitchell, Coalition for Community Schools. I'm not saying they are the opinions of the AIB or the advisory board. But I did want to share that bill is out there. There's another community school bill that we are looking at, but have not taken a position yet on, which would create a fund for emergency housing assistance vis-a-vis community school coordinators. So we're going to take a look at that. And those are things that we're watching. I know there will be an AIB bill, mostly technical fixes, right? And just a few things that are adjustments that need to happen for a variety of reasons. But yeah, so far it looks like, we're basically fully funded for the moment, although that long-term funding is still obviously a concern. So that's what we've been working on. We'll have our next Maryland Coalition for Community Schools meeting in March, and looking forward to getting some updates by then on kind of what's happening in the session period. So Hope, what's going on in Montgomery County?
Oh, the gifts that keep on giving. I would say that right now being able to work with community schools and understanding that work, I still also work with other things that tie into this pillar around mental health services that are in our schools as well. So the one thing we're excited about is that list of who are the schools for next year. Everyone is waiting, where, they're holding their breaths, and that's the big thing for us right now is people would love to get that earlier, not just our LEA, but across the state. So we can start that planning at the end of this year. So we're ready to go with some summer plans ahead of time. To make sure that everyone is ready to go for a successful 24-25 school year. And then also just great work around seeing how all of the LEAs support each other. I know my community school liaisons or coordinators that are school-based have made friends across the state. And I like to see that partnership that we have and them actually strategizing and supporting each other and always being there for each other. So that is one thing that I see in the power of this. It's not just to your LEA, it is across the state to ensure that we're helping students and families. I'm excited about that bill that you said about emergency housing, as we do know that is one of the biggest things for a lot of our families in community schools is stable housing and knowing that they are able to have a house and not are moving on a continuous basis because of different things that might be coming up with rental increases. The quality of the place that they're living might not be safe for their child or them. So just making sure that we know about those types of things. And then lastly, I would just say one of the things I do like is that we are offering, hopefully in that bill, that support to other LEAs to have some input in that funding, because that does make a difference when it's something that you might want to support for the entire cluster of schools instead of it individually being there and maybe something stopping. So it allows the LEA central office to kind of just give that support and take some of this off of our principals, because sometimes we forget that this can be more work a lot of times for our principals on top of them already qualifying maybe for Title I and then having partnerships in their schools that are very large. And so they're there for our children and staff. We want to also just think about what we are doing for the well-being of the people who are supporting. So whatever we can do across the state to support them, I think will be very beneficial.
You bring up a great point, Hope, about the list. Last year was a little confusing about the list sort of shifted, and the list must somewhat exist in order to price out how many schools are getting how much. So do we have a sense of when the list of CPG eligible schools will be released this year? And we did finally get, actually, MSDE, it was a weird shift where it took a long time, but then we got more information about the budget detail than we'd ever received before by district and by school in a massive spreadsheet, which was awesome. But I'd love to have that massive spreadsheet earlier, or just the list. I don't even need all the details, but having the list of who's coming on next would be really helpful to a lot of people.
So I know that came up recently, but I don't remember the answer. So I'm going to get you that answer about when it's going to be available. And then we'll obviously share it should we get it. But I want to confirm that before I can't even recall what I think the answer is right now.
Yeah, because I remember the final list changed last year from there was a bunch of schools that were on the list in February that ended up not being on the list in March.
Right.
So also I think I know that there's still work, and here's something that, for a future meeting, I know that Dr. Wright is getting her head around the neighborhood indicators of poverty issue and potentially consulting some new folks on that. And so getting an update from MSDE maybe a little bit down the road, because it sounds like it's a little bit in flux right now. about where they're headed with that conversation, along with some clarity and just how they're using the calculator right now to figure out which schools are eligible. That was a question I could never get a straight answer to exactly last year about how did the list change, why were they calculated differently, etc. The answer was they weren't. I was like, yes, they were. So if we had a clear understanding of how it's being calculated now, what the formula actually is to calculate it, and then because I know there's several factors in there, and then what direction they're heading or what the process will be by which they are going to determine what the next steps are with neighborhood indicators of poverty. That would be, I think, a great presentation for this board.
Sure. I will work on that. What I do remember is just how complex it gets. Like we were talking just about, there's schools that close in a year, and that changes some of the things. Like we were talking about some of the nuances of the list, but I can certainly make a request for that information and to see when it will be published and then get it once it's available. And yes, I agree that the neighborhood indicators of poverty, I know that it's kind of also in flux. So we'll make the request again and see when we could have somebody come.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a couple months out because I
Yeah.
know that there's a lot of moving parts, but I do think that's a really important conversation for us to
Absolutely.
have.
Yep.
I think the other things that were on the list were an update from implementation around the ELL work group recommendations. So, all the recommendations that came out of that work group, people were really excited about. They felt like that work group was very successful. So it'd be nice to kind of know like where things have moved since that started. And I know the special ed work group is still kind of getting going and moving forward, but eventually we'll want more from that. But I think just knowing, like, seeing how the ELL work group ended up and seeing the recommendations, and then knowing like what steps have, like, what's moved forward, what's been difficult, what challenges are in place, and what are the opportunities to maybe work on some of that might be a fun and interesting presentation as well.
That reminds me to mention that on our website, on the aib.maryland.gov website, on the implementation plan page, we have posted the updated BCP. It had been posted in our meeting materials when it was approved in July, but it wasn't like the pretty version, if you will. So the implementation plan page has been updated, and there are some components from the EL work group that have been woven into that. And then the work also continues in conversations with MSDE. So that definitely would be a great topic. But I don't want to be remiss and not tell you that you can now find the easy access to the most up-to-date Blueprint Comprehensive Plan on our website. And that if you got a copy mailed to you last year, we will be mailing those out this year once they are once they're printed, which they are at the printer right now.
I love paper.
Yeah, oh yeah, we do too. If people did not have it mailed to them last year, they can head over to our website. It's aib.maryland.gov and then hit the implementation tab. And then underneath the picture of the updated BCP, which is the top thing you see there, there's a link to request a paper copy to be mailed to you. So that is available. And Ellie, those are all great topics. And then I know Chandra will have some thoughts to add as well. Just
I
knowing
would think that the ELL one would be right up her alley and something she'd
Exactly.
be very interested in. So
Exactly. Yes. So yeah, I've made a list of some of these to follow up with, and I know Lisa probably has as well, and we will work on those to be able to get you see what we can get scheduled, and then to see if we can get some dates of when the list will be available for community schools.
great. If you have nothing else, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. And I think we have I think the plan is to stick with our schedule as we had started, was to be the last Thursday of the month or the fourth Thursday, whatever that works out to be, right?
Perfect.
And stick at this time. We were going to just see how that worked for people, but if that's good for you, we can still poll the rest of the members just to see if that's I'm still working, but I think otherwise those dates are already set for us, and we can keep with that schedule if that works for everybody else.
It works for me.
Yeah,
All Well, then I think we can adjourn and go off to our evening businesses, but appreciate everybody's time and, lots of good information. I'm very much looking forward to my print copy of the implementation plan arriving at my desk, and then I can feel its heft and pluck its pages
And put
all that
sticky
good
notes
stuff.
in it.
Exactly, exactly.
Perfect.
So.
Sounds great. Well, thank you very much for a great meeting, and we will have the meeting notice on the calendar for the next meeting in February. It should be up there now.
Great, thank you. Good night, everybody.
All right. Good night.